Hey everyone, it's me Michael. So today's lesson is a really quick overview of the names of the notes on the bass guitar fretboard. Okay, or any guitar fretboard really, but I'm just going to focus on the 4 strings on the bass. It's really quite simple, but you do need to have an understanding of what notes are available in Western music, right? The 12 tones on pretty much any instrument you would encounter, and sort of the pattern that they move in. It's kind of like the alphabet. Okay, so if you're familiar with the alphabet, then you're off to a pretty good start. Okay, so the musical alphabet only goes up to G, and once we get to G, we start over again at A. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and as you move through that order, you basically go up in pitch, you get higher, and as you move backwards, you get lower in pitch. So it is important to learn it both forwards and backwards. Okay, so you want to be able to go G, F, E, D, C, B, A, G, F, D, whatever. You get the idea. Okay, so we also need to fill in the gaps between those tones, right? So those tones that are not flat or sharp are called natural. Okay, A, C, G, F, those are all natural notes. Okay, B flat would be like a tone that is somewhere in between A and B, right? Same with like a D sharp, right? So you go D, and then D sharp, and then E. Okay. Now you also need to remember which notes have no flat or sharp. Okay. So there are 4 of those. Okay. And we use the acronym or the sentence "Big cats eat fast" to help us remember that B and C are actually right next to each other. So there is no B sharp and there is no C flat. It just goes right from B to C on the fretboard. Okay, and the same is true with E and F. Okay, if there is an E sharp, but that would just be F, so just call it F. Okay, E and F are right next to each other. Likewise, there's no F flat because that would just be an E. Okay, so to make something sharp just means you raise it up by 1 fret or 1/2 step. Okay, and to make something flat means you lower it by 1/2 step. Okay, so let's begin by first. You'd think you would want to kind of go through the order, and you can do that. I see the logic in that, but I think it's way more helpful and way more practical when you're actually playing songs, right? Songs rarely ever just go through in that order. That's kind of what has made it so tricky getting this far to memorize all these notes, okay? Because we rarely ever just go nice and cleanly through the order, okay? So let's instead focus on just memorizing some of the most common notes from low to high, just on the first 2 strings. Okay, so bear with me. We're going to learn them all by the end, but you'll see why this is sort of the step 1, if you will. It will take time to memorize all this information. You'll have to go through it over and over again. So begin by learning just the most common ones. That will get you 80% of the results you're looking for. So let's begin with all of the dots and the open strings just on the first 2 strings, okay? So the first string in this case being E, okay, that note is an E. What is the name of that tone? The sound of this is an E, okay? So that's why the E string is called the E string, because when it's open, it plays an E, okay? So the first dot on the E string is a G. I know we skipped F, okay? It's in here, but we're jumping up to the 3rd fret. That first dot is a G. G is in gorilla. Okay, don't forget it, G, okay? And remember, after G comes A, because there is no H through Z. We don't have those, okay? So we've run out of letters, so the next letter is an A again, okay? So after A comes B, so the next dot is a B, and after B comes C, but I want you to remember that this 9th fret is actually a C sharp, okay? So E is the open string, and then the dots go G, A, B, C sharp. Okay, as you can tell, it is kind of in alphabetical order. It seems a little weird to start on E. When we skipped F, we'll get there. Okay, but then it goes G, and then it's also kind of weird to think of A as being after G, but in music that actually makes a lot of sense. Okay, and then it goes to B, and then to C, but the C is sharp. Okay, but it's kind of like alphabetical order. E, and then G, A, B, C sharp. Okay. All right, now let's do the A string. It's actually a little easier, I think, because it begins on A. Okay, very good. So we're going to skip B, and the first dot is going to be a C. not C sharp, just C. Okay? And the next dot, the 5th fret is D. And then the next dot, the 7th fret is E. And then the 9th fret is F sharp. Okay, so to recap, open A string is A, and then we have on the dots C, D, E, F sharp. Okay, and that little series there of the dots, C, D, E, F sharp, that's alphabetical order, right? A, B, C, D, E, F sharp. Right? You just gotta remember that the 9th fret, that one at the top, is gonna be a sharp note. Okay, and that's gonna be helpful because we're gonna fill in the gaps with all the rest in a minute. Okay, but I really can't stress enough how important it is to just start there. Memorize those. Okay, those are probably the most common notes there are, and filling in the gaps after that will be simple if you just memorize that. Okay, you want to be able to do it in any kind of random order. Someone should be able to say to you, D, you just go right there. B, C, C sharp, G, E, right? Okay, so once you got the hang of that, you've got those memorized, committed to memory, you use them all the time. Okay, it's time to start filling in sort of the gaps, the in-between notes that we didn't name. Okay, so to do that, we need to remember what I said earlier about flat notes are just a note that's been lowered a half step or 1 fret, and sharps are the opposite. They've been raised up a half step or by 1 fret. Okay, so let's look at A. Okay, and you should be able to find that quickly. Okay, that 5th fret of the E string here, right? Not the A string, but the 5th fret of the E string. Okay, so we know that this is A, and we know that the 7th fret is B. Okay, so what is this note here in between? Okay, well, there are 2 correct answers because this note, the 6th fret in between A and B, could either be an A that's been made sharp, what we call A sharp, right? Meaning an A that's been raised up a half step, or it could be a B flat, which is a B that's been lowered a half step. Okay, so both are correct, both are true, and that's why it's kind of tricky sometimes to remember the flats and sharps, but it's essentially both A sharp and B flat. That is the exact same thing. They sound the same. We tend to pick flats over sharps if there's some reason to, like the key of the song, the context of the song, and the other notes we're using has a lot of sharps. We'll tend to just stick with all sharps in the whole song, so we don't mix flats and sharps. Or sometimes we like to use flats if we move down into that note and sharps if we go up into that note. It kind of just depends on context, okay? But it's imperative that you learn both versions and that you understand and you can conceptualize what that means when somebody gives you the name of a note and they say like G flat. You need to know what that means. It's a G that's been lowered a half step. It's a G flat, okay? All right, so remember what I said about big cats eat fast, okay? B and C are right next to each other, and the same is true for E and F, meaning there is no weird half-step note in between, okay? Let's look at, let's see, we'll go to C right here, okay? So remember, 3rd fret of the A string, that's a C. So if we go down a half step, you could call that C flat. That does make sense, but this note is already a B, right? It should sound identical to the 7th fret of the E string because they're both B. Hear that? Okay, so if that's a B, we can just call it B. We don't need to call it C flat, okay? Likewise, if this is a B, you could call C a B sharp, I suppose, but everyone would look at you funny because it's already called C, and that's just much more easier, much more natural sounding, okay? So C and B, okay, right next to each other, okay? Same is true here. This is B, and this is C, which is why when we get to that last dot on the 9th fret, that's a C sharp, because it's like a C that's been raised up a half step, okay? Whether something is flat or sharp doesn't really have anything to do with the dots. It's kind of just coincidence that it works out that way. Mostly natural notes on the dots, at least on the first 2 strings. And in a minute, we're gonna get to the last 2 strings, and you'll see that it kind of doesn't really, that pattern doesn't continue, okay? So these 2 9th fret notes here on the first 2 strings being sharp, kind of just coincidence. Okay, so moving on, we have here on the top note F sharp, which means if we were to lower it a half step, we would get an F natural, or just F, okay? Which is why this is E, okay? Then E flat, we're going down, so I'll use flat. It's also D sharp, which makes this D, C sharp or D flat, C, B, B flat or A sharp, A, right? This is also A flat or G sharp, G, G flat or F sharp, F, E. Right? Or moving up, E, F, F sharp or G flat, G, G sharp or A flat, A sharp or B flat, B, C, C sharp or D flat, D, D sharp or E flat, E. Okay, now we're back to E. I went through every single letter, all the flats and all the sharps, and I've arrived at the 12th fret. The 12th fret is special because the whole pattern is going to repeat again. So the 12th fret is essentially the same as the open string. So whatever the open string is, the 12th fret will have the same name. And you'll have gone through every single note that's available on the fretboard once through the pattern before you get to the 12th fret. So you could think of the 13th fret as the same as the 1st fret, or the 15th fret the same as the 3rd fret, right? And that's where the dots repeat again, that same pattern, right? So again, I have on the dots G, A, B, C sharp. And then the 24th fret is the same as the 12th fret, which is the same as the open. So this is also an E, okay? So moving forward, the whole 12th fret through the 24th fret is exactly the same as 0 through 12, okay? So that should be relatively simple. You need to spend some time sort of training your mind to see this as just a facsimile of this over here. It kind of gets squished together a little closer, but it's really exactly the same, okay? It's an octave higher, which means it does have a different pitch, but the pattern of notes is the same. If an E up here works or an E down here works, they are the same. They should both sound good in either context. Or if one sounds bad, the other will sound bad because they're both E, or vice versa. If this is a B and it sounds good in your song, then this B down here will also sound good in your song. They're really the same. Treat them as the same tone, the same pitch, but one has a higher pitch, but they're the same note. I know, confusing. But it's helpful when learning the pattern of the notes and the fretboard. Okay, to just think of that as a copy of this. Okay, so what do we do about the last two strings? Okay, well, we need to sort of remember our octave shape. The bass plays octaves a lot. Okay, octave is basically if you took a note that you knew the name of, like say B, okay, and you go from here up 2 strings and then up 2 frets, that's going to be the next B. It's an octave higher, right? Just like how the 12th fret is an E, but it's an octave higher of the open string, which is an E. Okay, it's an octave higher. Okay, octave, by the way, being 8 tones of the major scale before you get back to the same note. Okay, so the major scale doesn't use all 12 tones that are available on our instrument. It removes some of them that don't work. They don't play nice with each other, and it just removes those. And what we're left with are notes that sound harmonious and good together, and there's only 7 of those tones before you get back to the 8th tone being a copy of the 1st. So when we say octave, what we're really talking about is an octave of the major scale, 8 tones, okay, of the major scale, and they are the same note. The 1 and the 8th note of the scale are the same note, okay? So, I know, a little confusing because we've gone 12 notes up in the whole pattern of the fretboard, but we call it an octave. A little confusing, I know, okay? It will make sense in time, just gotta remember that, okay? So that octave shape is this, right? Any 2 notes that are 2 strings apart and 2 frets apart are going to be the same note, but an octave apart, but they'll have the same name. So if this is an A, this is an A. If this is an F sharp, this is an F sharp. If this is a D, this is a D. So the pattern sort of begins again on the same last 2 strings, okay, but starting sort of 2 frets higher. So this is an E, right, because that's an E there, right? Same thing, so E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C, so on and so forth. This would be an A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, E, so on and so forth. Okay, so learning to sort of see that octave shape when you need it is the trick to learning all of the notes on all the other strings. Okay, and then kind of just filling in the gaps if you want to figure out what 1 and 0 is. The open string you should know from like lesson 1. This is the G string, this is G sharp, which is why this is A. It's also an octave of the A string. Okay, and then you continue on through the pattern from there. Okay, so hopefully that was insightful. I know it seems like a lot, but like I said, start slow, memorize first the most common notes, the dots on the first 2 strings, and then maybe use that octave shape to sort of see how, okay, they kind of just follow that same pattern on the next 2 strings, but they've been shifted up by 2 frets. Okay, really an octave, okay, 2 frets and an octave, but the notes are the same. Okay, and then learn to fill in the gaps by sort of beginning to teach yourself or to try and train yourself to understand the difference between flats and sharps. Okay, whether you're going up or down, and remember B and C are right next to each other, so there is no B sharp and there is no C flat. Same with E and F. There is no F flat and there is no E sharp. Okay, and you can even just say to yourself, get in the habit of memorizing the muscle memory of saying to yourself A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, E, right? Ugh, you get the idea. Right? Maybe that's not the best way to do it. Instead, you should be playing and saying to yourself E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, B, A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E. Right? And just go through the whole pattern and really familiarize yourself with it 1 string at a time. Then do the same thing with the next string. A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. Okay? And then on to all 4 strings eventually. And if you do that enough, you'll start to have it memorized and you start playing it in songs. And when you learn songs, try to move away from saying to yourself, 3rd fret of the E string to the 5th fret of the A string to the 7th fret of the E string or whatever. Instead, just say to yourself, it's G to D to B to C, right? That's so much simpler, so much easier, right? And because there's more than one way to play those notes, there's more than one way to play a G, you're not constricting yourself or limiting yourself to doing it in one particular configuration. It has to be the 3rd fret of the E string. No, it doesn't. It could be the 5th fret of the D string, right? Because those are both G. Or it has to be 5th fret of the A string, and no, if you just say to yourself, it's A, right? Then it's A, right? 5th fret here, or the open string, it doesn't matter. And you can start to determine for you, as an individual, what version of your songs you like best, whether you want to go up to that note or down to that note, or use the fretted version or the open string version. It's up to you. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful. Keep working on it. Shoot me a message if you need help. I'm always happy to help. All right, have fun, and I'll see you in the next one.